You're tuning in to Geek Speak, a Geek Insider production. We're sitting with special guests in entertainment, news, and tech. So sit back and enjoy the show as we geek out together right now. Good afternoon, everybody. This is Meredith Loughran, and this is Geek Speak. I have a special guest with me today, Dimitri Logothetis, writer and director. And if you're watching us on YouTube, you're going to see that screenshot here. He is the director of JIU JITSU, which stars Nicolas Cage. Let me drop this card here. Hi, Dimitri. How are you?
Good, Meredith. How are you?
I'm doing really well. And now I thought you were on the West Coast, but you are in fact across the pond. So it's kind of late for you right now.
It is, but it's okay. I mean, I stay up pretty late anyway. I'm in the Mediterranean prepping a couple of new pictures.
Oh, so the Mediterranean. How's the weather though? I bet it's beautiful.
It's just like it is in Los Angeles, actually. It's the same. It's kind of the same temperature. It's a little cold at night, but really warm in the day.
Mm-hmm. So I got to watch JIU JITSU, and I was actually a little bit surprised that Nicolas Cage wasn't he wasn't in every scene. But what was it like working with him? And tell us a little bit about JIU JITSU, because I believe this started in a comic book, didn't it?
It did. I relaunched the Kickboxer franchise, which was originally with Jean-Claude Van Damme. And I did Kickboxer Vengeance. And I starred a new fellow by the name of Alain Moussi, who was a French-Canadian. And then I did Kickboxer Vengeance. I brought Jean-Claude Van Damme back to be the mentor, teacher. And then I also did a sequel to that called Kickboxer Retaliation. And I had both of them back. And then I always had some major martial artists as well as some major world champions from all over the fight world, primarily MMA. And then also I had Mike Tyson in the last one. So in any case, I was sitting there thinking to myself, how is it that I can ramp up this genre? And I thought, wouldn't it be cool if I could do science fiction martial arts? And so I sat down with my writing partner of 25 years, Jim McGrath, and I said to Jim, I said, look, why don't we write a comic book? And then he said, have you lost your mind? And I said, perhaps I have, but why don't we write a comic book anyway? And I said, that way I can take a look and see what the picture is going to look like. And so we went ahead and we wrote a comic book of the same name. And then I looked at the comic book and I thought, I think this is going to make a pretty cool film. And it was, based on putting together this sort of crew that goes up against this formidable foe and that can never be beaten and has never been beaten. Similar to the Expendables, Mission Impossible, that kind of stuff, except set in the martial arts world. And that's really how the whole thing came about. I never, in my wildest dreams, expected that it would be in the top 5 on Netflix in the US. And then it also ended up, now it's right this minute, it's number 1 in Canada on Netflix. So,
wow.
Yeah, it's which means it's sort of crossed out of the martial arts genre and into the action genre and into, you can't hit those numbers on pure martial arts audiences alone or science fiction audiences. So you really have to kind of go mainstream. And again, I'm grateful, believe me, but I never for one second, I normally, my films always hit the top 40. However, Kickboxer Retaliation, Kickboxer Vengeance is in the top 15 most watched films on Netflix right now. So they've been around for about 5 years. So somehow or other, the audience is finding the films and, they're entertaining. They're a lot of fun. They're escape. A few of my friends have said that I like to make guilty pleasure films. So if you like a little guilty pleasure, watch jiu-jitsu.
Well, now I understand Jean-Claude Van Damme, but Nicolas Cage, you don't really think of MMA fighting and things like that. What was the selection process like in um, getting him for this film?
Well, Nick is a wonderful action star. I mean, he's starred in a number of action films, and he always delivers a pretty amazing character. We were originally talking about Bruce Willis, and we were very close to making a deal with Bruce. But I'm so happy that it was Nick, because Nick really brought so much to this character. He was on a 20 some odd hour flight because we shot the film in Cyprus. And then he gets off the plane and he immediately meets with me and he says, Dimitri, he said, what would you like me to do to help you tell this story? He said, I've got a bunch of ideas, but I want to know, you as a storyteller, what is it exactly that I can do? How can I help? I mean, he's just a terrific, marvelous actor to work with. You don't win an Academy Award without giving 100%. And so he said to me, he said, I was thinking, just because this character has sort of been trapped for 6 years in Burma, he said, I think maybe I was going to channel. I was thinking about channeling Dennis Hopper in Apocalypse Now. And I said, right on. And so that's what he did. And he's really the Obi-Wan Kenobi of the film, because he lays out the exposition, he lays out the story and the background of the story. And I know he's not in the beginning of the film, but I must tell you, he's in about a third of the whole movie. So that's quite a bit of screen time besides the action sequences that he did.
Now, there are a lot of faces that are recognizable now because of the films that whether it's big screen or little screen that they're in. How were you able to get this cast together? Because I think perhaps when you were making this movie, they were maybe virtually unknown, or did you have a connection with them from working in other things?
Well, I mean, Tony Jaa is a marvelous martial artist, and he's a really well-known martial artist. He was in Fast and Furious. Mm-hmm. He started in a movie called Ong Bak, the Thai Warrior, which really gave him his break. I think that was discovered and brought over from Thailand. And so he made sequels to that. But he's been around. I think he just did a movie with Mila Jovovich, Monster Hunter. So he's been around for quite a while, and he's really a well-known martial artist. I mean, let's see, Juju Chan starred in Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon 2.
She's fabulous.
Yeah. So let's see, Frank Grillo, he's got his own television series, and he starred in a number of pictures. Mm-hmm. I think the most recent is Boss Level with Mel Gibson. Let's see, who else? Alain Moussi, starred in the first two Kickboxers for me. So, there's a number of really well-known actors in the picture that have been in the action genre. So, and they've either starred in their own films or not. But I was just fortunate enough to bring them all together because I really needed that kind of ensemble cast.
Mm-hmm. Now, wasn't this a fairly small budget compared to some of the bigger Hollywood films?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I'm an independent, and even when I make a picture, anywhere between, anywhere below 25, 28 million. There's always the cash, and there's always the deferments and all kinds of stuff. So you hear all kinds of numbers that are printed. And everybody always tells me, well, I read on Google that the picture cost 30 million. And it's really more about the amount of money you have to work with, because money's time. Mm-hmm. And so I just don't have 100 million or 150 million to make a picture. So my time is very valuable to me. And luckily, I have my predominant cast is martial artists, and they're able to do all of their own stunt work much better than any stuntman can do anyway. Mm-hmm. And so consequently, I don't have to double people. which really, the audiences love. And I don't really need to do the kind of things like, for instance, I can take anybody in science fiction, a Marvel film and attach them to wires and fly them around. When you take a look at my guys are actually doing back flips, front flips, standing aerials. Juju Chan, the kind of stuff that she does is just phenomenal. And so I think once the audiences watch this, they really respond to it, because the athleticism that they bring as action stars to the screen is just really a marvel to watch.
Mm-hmm. I think it's a testament to you as a director also, because you might be able to take a stunt person. You take a stunt person and they get the action and stuff like that, but to put them in the camera and take direction and be the actor like that's your face on there. It has to be two slightly different animals.
Well, I appreciate that, Meredith. It's very nice of you to say. It is. And, you're always juggling this, right? Because I don't think you can approach a martial arts film and a martial arts centric film without a true martial artist. I don't think that the audiences will accept it around the world. I mean, you go all the way back to Bruce Lee, you take a look at Jackie Chan, you take a look at Jet Li, you see, you really need Jean-Claude Van Damme. You need people that are true martial artists at heart. And so you have to start there. Okay. So now you have to get a performance out of them as well. And so I try to keep the performances within the range of what they can pull off. And then I bring in some wonderful supporting actors around them to really help tell the story. And so I always try to play that balance. But again, I think that, you have to have really stellar martial artists to get the audiences to jump into the genre.
And I want to kind of circle back to the comic book connection, because for me personally, I've been scripting out my own comic books. It is not easy. I am so glad that I'm doing this when I'm older. What was that process like for you?
It's just like you. The good news about a comic book is that you can do a lot of exposition. So you can say something like, well, 2,000 years ago, the planets collided, and after the collision, they manufactured 15 other planets, and then you just go right to that. And so you can do things in 3 and 4 sentences that sort of wrap up, something that in a movie you'd have to sit there and actually shoot, or create. So that's the beauty of a comic book, because you're sort of forced to contain everything, right? What do you normally write in a comic book? 15 pages, 12 to 18 pages, something like that. So you're really forced to sort of condense down a story. And then once you have that, for me, it helps you to get to treatment and then ultimately to a script. So we're writing a comic book right now for Jiu Jitsu 2, actually. So we'll have that done in about a week. And then we'll be going to print on that next month, because that's going to be the backbone for the new Jiu Jitsu that all the fans and distributors around the world have asked me to start putting together.
Now, with the comic book, is that something that you're planning on financing yourself and distributing? Where can that be found? Book 1 and book 2, or is it something that you plan on maybe going to Kickstarter or Indiegogo with for crowdfunding?
I financed the first one myself and through my company, and then I did that specifically because I wanted to see it. And then we printed up, I don't remember how many we printed up. I think maybe about 3,000 or 4,000. And then we published them through Amazon. And then I gave a bunch away to a bunch of comic book stores around the country. And it was really funny, when you make a film, now all of a sudden we've got orders. So they're like, can we get the comic book? How can we get the comic? Can you print some more up for us? So on this next round, I have a feeling that I'll be able to just get it published. Not that I care. I mean, I really care about going to the film itself, but I do spend an awful lot of time making sure that that there's a really wonderful comic book illustrator that really starts to spell out the characters and stuff.
Yeah. So being that this is Geek Insider, I love getting inside the geek. And asking your Genesis story, was filmmaking the plan? Was it Plan B?
No, no, it was never Plan B. It was never Plan A. It was just happened. I mean, my family always wanted me to be a business major, so I went to junior college, and there was I had to take either a speech class or an acting class. So I took the acting class, and the gentleman that taught the acting class in El Camino College was a wonderful acting coach by the name of Burnett Ferguson. And he looked at me, and he ran the whole department. He said to me, he said, "You know something?" He said, "You're a really good actor." He said, I'm gonna star you in a play. And he said, I want you to star in this play. And I said, "I don't want to act in a play." I said, "I just want to finish this acting class and, move on to, to business school and move on to, get out of this 2 years and then continue on." He said, No. He goes, "Really?" He said, "I'm telling you, you're going to have a really good time. And I want to star you in this play." And the play was Treasure Island. And he had me play Captain Smollett, the leader of the good guys. And so from there, I got an agent. And then I immediately started booking a bunch of commercials. And then I did a bunch of films as an actor. I did the most significant one was I had a small part in a movie called New York, New York with Liza Minnelli and Robert De Niro that Scorsese directed. And so he's the one that recommended that I go into film school because he saw something that I'd been writing on the set, which was for an English class. I was writing a short story. And he said to me, he said, "You should go to film school." And I said to him, I said, "What's film school?" Because it was a new thing, film school. And he said, "Oh," he goes, you're going to learn to be a filmmaker." And I said, "Why would I do that?" So it was like, he said, "I'm going to write you a letter." He goes, "Because you're a good storyteller." And he said, "That's what you need to be." And so he wrote me a letter and I submitted it to a bunch of different film schools and I got accepted in film school. So it just, that's how it happened. And I ended up being pretty good. I ended up getting a scholarship to Loyola. And then I did a short film that won about 12 national and international film awards. And then I got a job working as a director in cable TV, which was also a brand new thing at the time. And that's how it all continued from there,
Well, I mean, it takes more than storytelling, the ability to storytell, because you have to have an eye for angles and things, and being a director as well, communicating with the stars and the other crew, because now you're dealing with all of these personalities. So there's I was going to say there's a lot of psychology that goes into that as well.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, my father was really wonderful because I got into photography. And so that's where my geekdom came from. And so when I was going to college, I just thought, I better really learn photography and I better really learn lighting. And so I learned lighting really well and I learned my lenses. And I had some wonderful professionals at Loyola, Marymount in the South Bay in Los Angeles. And so that's really how I got into that side of it. And I really had a pretty good eye for camera. And so and we were shooting film back then. So film school was really film school, So I pretty much had to learn from scratch how to edit a film and how to mix sound in a film and how to take a script and a story and put it up on the screen, which is a completely different thing than writing a book or writing a short story. And so I really learned, I remember one of these excellent professors that I had there, he just said to me, he said, look, he said, you should be able to just turn the sound off in a movie, and you should be able to watch the film, and you should be able to know what's going on. He said, it's got nothing to do with any of the dialogue at all. And he said, if you're telling the story, or your actors are telling the story, he said, you don't get it. He said, you should be able to tell it with images. And so that's always been my goal. And so to this day, I'm still working on trying to figure that out and do the best I can with that,
Okay, so you mentioned film school, photography, business. Where does the martial arts come into play?
I have 2 black belts. I got a black belt in Tang Sudo from a really wonderful world champion martial artist named Howard Jackson, who was just a terrific martial artist when I was about 18, 19. And then I went on and I got a black belt in Kempo. And so, which is a martial art that that Elvis Presley and Bruce Lee and stuff started. And I actually worked out with Elvis Presley when I was very young in the dojo. I was used as his sparring partner, by my sensei in the dojo.
Wow, that's pretty amazing.
That's where the martial arts comes from.
But that takes decades, though. I mean, it could, because aren't there different levels of the black belt too?
Yeah, and I was young, so it within the course of about 10 years is when I got both belts, and then Howard, who was my teacher, and he was a fighter. He fought around the world, and he forced us to sort of spar back in the day and go to competition and fight in competition, which I hated, because I just said, Howard, I said, I don't really want to fight. And he kept saying to me, he said, you're not going to get good at this unless you go out and you fight people you don't know. So he said, I don't really care what you want to do. And the wonderful thing about martial arts is it teaches you discipline. It teaches you respect. And most of the fighters that I have been blessed to work with, world champions around the world, they are some of the humblest people you'll ever meet in your life. They have a sweetness about them that when they step out of the ring, they just happen to be really humble and sweet and yes, sir, no, sir, yes, ma'am, So I think it's kind of a wonderful thing. It taught me a lot of discipline.
I would hope so, because when really pushed, they could kill you, And I think with that kind of power and strength, though, you have to have some kind of way to just say, no, it's okay, you do you, or I'll kill you.
Yeah, well, in the ring, it's a whole other thing in competition. But we were always from all the guys that I ever learned from, we were taught to do the exact opposite. If you were going to get into any kind of confrontation outside of the ring, your primary goal was to get out of it, to say you're sorry, I apologize. Even if you knew you could take them, it's supposed to be the last thing you do. And so that builds a lot of character, So again, I mean, I was fortunate enough to make a documentary early on in my career called Champions Forever, with Muhammad Ali, Joe Frazier, George Foreman, Larry Holmes, and Ken Norton. And it was the first documentary of its kind where all these boxers were put together, and they were talking about themselves and what their fights were like and the competitions that they had. And one of my favorite times was spending the time that I did with Muhammad Ali, because he was just a really incredible human being. He was one of the kindest, bravest human beings that I'd ever met. So again, I've been fortunate enough to meet some pretty great people. And that's where the martial arts comes from.
Well, I'd like to pivot into that, if you don't mind. as a young filmmaker, how in the world did you get names like that into the same room and say yes to a film?
Well, it's primarily, not thinking that you can't do it. So I thought,
There's that.
God, nobody has ever gotten these guys together. Everybody's always talking about them. I grew up with Wide World of Sports. And so you always had this commentator talking about what these guys were thinking and what they're thinking when they're getting into the ring and their background. And I thought, why don't we hear it directly from them? Why don't we put them all together? And then I reached out to a few buddies of mine and I said, is there any way that anybody knows Muhammad Ali? And I found a fellow that did. And so he went out and talked to Ali. And then Ali said that he was into it. And then I just started to put money together as an independent to do a documentary. And documentaries were not a big deal at the time. Like, everybody thought, why would you want to do this? But I found a few people that thought it would be a good idea. And that documentary ended up being one of the highest selling documentaries of all time back for about 10 years. We broke a bunch of records when they were selling videotapes. But that's really how it started. I guess, I was just too dumb to know that you can't do it. So I just said, well, what the heck? I said, why don't we just go ahead and try to do it? And I ended up putting it together. Everybody I would call, all the distributors, they told me I'd never pull it off. So I remember talking to one distributor who we ended up making a deal with. His name was Jim Jamiro, and he had a company called J2, okay? And they were selling videotape. I think he used to sell stuff for Disney or something. And so I called him on the phone, and he laughed at me. And he said, oh, you'll never get all these guys together in one room. I said, okay, I'll tell you what. I said, I'm supposed to put them all together in Vegas, and they're being hosted at the Sands Hotel, by the Sands managers and stuff like that. And I said, so why don't you fly out? And I said, if I get them together, I said, you have to bring me a cashier's check for $250,000 as the down payment against the contract, because you're going to distribute it in America. And he said, deal. So he's short, he was about 5'2", something like that. And so I remember him flying out, and I had all the boxers, all 5 of these boxers in tuxes. Okay. So I shoved him right in the center of the boxers, and there he was looking around. And I said, Jim, where's the check? So he pulls this check out and he hands it. We're independents. And he just looked around. He looked at these giant men around him, and he just handed the check and said, you got a deal. And it ended up being a very successful, very, very successful project. And one of my favorite projects, by the way.
That's amazing. That is amazing. No, so how did the 18-year-old Dimitri doing martial arts and things like that eventually merge into making martial art films?
I have no idea.
I mean, was it like, hey, I've got this idea and just kind of scribbling notes and things, or
no?
What was that like?
I was directing. I started working at a cable television company. It was the biggest cable company in Los Angeles, and I was directing television shows, talk shows, game shows, and then I put a small company together. And I wanted to make independent features, and I made a couple of goofy, small independent features, a little horror film, and a couple of sexy comedies that were very popular at the time. And then many years, I started directing TV, and I got into action television. I directed a considerable amount of action television, and then I ended up becoming a showrunner and actually executive produced a couple of TV shows for Warner Brothers. And I remember having it was springtime, and during spring break, I would take my son down to Encinitas, and I'd book a house down there, and we'd hang out in Encinitas. And he was down there with his buddy, and I'm watching them on their little laptop, and they're watching this movie called Ong Bak, the Thai Warrior, starring Tony Jaa, and they must have watched it in that week 10 times. And I said, what the hell are you guys doing? And they said, he said, Dad, you got to see this. He said, this guy's really cool. Look at the stuff this guy does. And I said, oh, wow. I said, he's amazing. I said, so I said, all right. I said, I'm going to put together a martial arts film. And he said, I said, yeah. I said, let me see if I can get this guy. And, one thing led to another. I ended up years later purchasing a company called Kings Road with some partners. And then Kings Road happened to have the Kickboxer franchise in it. And that's how I relaunched the Kickboxer franchise. I tried to get Tony Jaa for Kickboxer. He wasn't available because he just kicked off a huge career. And then I finally landed him for jiu-jitsu. So that's how it all happened. I mean, I was just watching my son, and my son and his friend were geeks. They just were kids who just were into computers, and they were just into all of this wild stuff, and they were watching and really, very, very smart kids. And they were just fascinated by martial arts. And I thought, you guys, really like this stuff? And they said, oh yeah, it's amazing. And I said, all right. And, my son said to me, he said, Dad, he goes, you used to do martial arts. I said, yeah. He goes, you were pretty good, right? And I said, yeah, I was pretty good. And he said, well, you're really going to do a martial arts film? I said, sure. Yeah, why not? And that's basically that's usually how everything happens. I just kind of think about it, and then it just crosses my path, and then I decided to jump on it and just get it done.
Now, I've kind of crawled through your IMDb a little bit. So you've got some horror in there, you've got action, and obviously with the martial arts. Is there a particular genre that you enjoy more than others?
I think I enjoy action.
Mm-hmm.
I think you'll see that primarily it's action. And, it's always about, no matter what, it's always about that, the leading character for me is always about that little boy and little girl in all of us that's been bullied and been pushed around. And hopefully a lot of the people, both men and women that watch my films, will say, man, I'm really going to start working out now. That was really cool. I mean, it's going to get me back into the gym. It's going to get me back into this. And, I try to instill in the characters a kind of a code, and the fact that they're willing to lay their life on the line for the greater good and for their family and their friends. And so that's probably the thing that drives me the most is the fact that this character is willing to sacrifice for the greater good. So.
And it seems like jujitsu kind of marries them a little bit there, because you kind of get that obviously with the martial arts, but you got a little bit of Predator in there, some alien action going on.
Yeah, everybody sees that. But before Predator, I'll tell you, one of my favorite films growing up was The Day the Earth Stood Still.
Oh, yes. Very good film.
And the original Day the Earth Stood Still with which Howard Hawks directed. And that was before my time, but nevertheless, I saw it in film school, and I just found it to be really fascinating, Mm-hmm. And then something else that I really loved a lot was The Thing, which took place up in the North Pole. And the remake with John Carpenter, I always found to be really cool too. So for me, that's really where that genesis comes from, and of course everybody knows Predator because it's the most recent film like that. But that's really, if you look at my Brax character, and he was designed after Alien. If you look at the Alien 2 and 3 movies and you take a look at Brax's suit, you'll see that there's an awful lot of Geiger, who's a wonderful designer who designed that whole movie and the look of the movie. So those are some of my inspirations for that. And I think we pulled it off.
Now, with jiu-jitsu, there's, I guess you're doing a bit of a franchise with it, because with the genesis of the comic book going into the film and things, and now possibly going into you already said you're making the second comic book and another film. How far do you think that this story arc is going to be? Live streaming, there's my dog.
Well, Kickboxer, before I got involved in the company, they made 7. and we made two. They want me to make a third one. So as long as the audiences like it and are into it, and we can come up with new ideas, I mean, you're right. There is a franchise there, and I never knew there would be, but I hoped there would be. But I certainly didn't think that it would take off as quickly as it did. You know, the original Kickboxer with Jean-Claude Van Damme was panned by the critics. You know, critics never really like martial arts films. They sort of, it's certainly Western critics. Um, they just think they're goofy. But in the East, you know, they think they're the best movies you can make. They're the Western of the East, you know. Um, and However, you know, interestingly enough, my Kickboxer Retaliation got 92% critics on Rotten Tomatoes, and I think our audience is up around 80. I know that our audience on this one on Rotten Tomatoes is around 70%. So evidently, the audience is far surpassing the critics, and uh, you know, my a lot of my friends keep saying that we've sort of hit a little pop culture here. So hopefully they'll be around for quite a while, you know.
Well, it just seems like, it's kind of cyclical in a way. And it seems like you're kind of getting right back into it where people are receptive to it again. And I think quite honestly, just my opinion, that because we were shut down last year, and people have gotten their COVID bodies, kind of growing into their chairs and stuff like that, they're looking at these action films and being motivated to move and get back into shape and things like that. And we see those things, and I think it's a good influence.
Well, I agree with you. I think that, you know, I make escape, and I give you the ability to live through characters and escape a little bit and forget what's going on around you. And I think, you know, right now, I think we're all in desperate need of some escape, and we're also in desperate need of some real heroes, you know. The one thing that I try to do is I try to inject as much authenticism in the action and in my martial artists, and that's what they bring to the screen. Because again, I said I can't compete with the huge budgets, but my guys and gals do everything that you see, and it's some of the most amazing athleticism that you'll ever see from martial artists.
And I appreciate that, because nothing like movies to escape for a short period of time. Um, what Because as if you weren't busy enough with the comic book and another film, what else do you have in the pipeline?
I'm working on a movie called The Man of War, which was written by Gary Scott Thompson, who wrote the Fast and Furious film
Mhm,
franchise.
mhm.
And I've got a couple of films that I'm working on with another partner of mine, which is All of Me, a remake of All of Me, which is a comedy that
Mhm.
I'm going to be producing.
Well, that's a
Um,
big switch for you, kind of.
yeah, well, but I mean, I like all films, but as a filmmaker, I know what I can do really well, and I'm not a comedy director, and so that's something that we've got to really put in the hands of a wonderful, you know, a comedic director. And so I've got that. I've got another picture. I've been looking to do something else with Nick Cage, and so we're going back and forth, and we may have found something, but I can't make that announcement for a while. So I've got a number of things that I'm constantly working on. They want me to make another Kickboxer, the last of this round, so to speak, a Kickboxer 3 called Kickboxer Armageddon.
Mhm.
So and then I'm going to put together some really wonderful martial artists in that. So, you know, jujitsu too. So there's a lot to put together.
How do you keep it all straight?
One day at a time.
Yeah, there you go.
Just focus on whatever it is I'm doing, you know, today, and keep it all moving forward, and see what gets really exciting and what I want
Mhm.
to dedicate my life to for the next year and a half. You know.
Yeah. No, and speaking of dedicating your life to a certain project, how long does it normally take from, I guess, concept to release on any particular project?
Well, with major studios, it can take years and years and years. You just don't know.
Hmm.
You've got major projects that major stars are putting together all the time. And unless they feel that the timing is right or the script is right or the rewrite is right, it can take years. It can take many, many years. With independence, we can't afford to, all of me is going to be a major studio, right? But the independent pictures that I do, I can't afford to put time into something that I don't make. And so I try to get everything done within about a year and a half. So once I focus on one particular project, I try to get it written, shot, and done and out within about a year and a half.
Yeah, a lot of people see. I'm kind of rubbing elbows with a lot of people who are in the comic book industry, right? And so the brass ring is DC, it's Marvel. But you have a lot of people who are independent. They're like, no, I'm good. It's like, sure, I would love to get credits in that. Is that kind of similar in movies where, you kind of look at the big studios and like, that's the brass ring. I know I made it when I go there. Or the that independent spirit is like, hey, I am in charge of my own destiny in a way,
Well, I think that streaming.
barring the money.
Well, I think streaming has completely changed all that, and I think COVID has added to that because there are no theaters. Theaters are just coming back, and however, we in jiu-jitsu rose to the very top of Netflix, and we beat out some huge motion pictures, which again I'm very grateful for and wasn't expecting. So clearly, if you make entertainment, you'll be found. And the audiences, it's 200, what is it, 200 million subscribers, I think, on Netflix in the US and another, 20 million in Canada. So you can't hit, number one or the top five unless you got all of them watching, and, or the majority of them watching, let's put it that way. So I think that streaming has completely leveled the playing field, and anybody who makes a good picture, which is the way it should be anyway, is able to just able to rise to the top and grab an audience. And again, I think that the audiences today, they're pretty specific about what they want. They really know what they want, and they're all looking for something new, and they're all looking for something. I'm for one, I was trapped for months indoors. I think I watched all my favorite TV shows over and over and over again just because I wanted to see those again. Um, going all the way back to The Sopranos. So I just kept watching all these shows and the Vikings now, and the new Star Trek movies, and suddenly you ran out of pictures to watch. So anytime a new movie came out, or The Tiger King came on, I'm like, oh great, let's watch that, because I just want to see how can I kill another 3 or 4 hours today before I go out to try to see if I can buy a soda. So, I think that really enabled us to sort of focus on what we like, and I think the audiences around the world have done just that.
Well, we have blasted past the half hour mark, and I do appreciate your time. I know it's getting late over in Cyprus, so we're going to let you go. But for Geek Insider, we normally have one final question that we ask all our guests, and that is, if you could go back in time and give your younger self one piece of advice, Dimitri, what would that be?
Um, don't worry about all that stuff you're worried about. And don't try to sit there and predict and plan your life, because it's just going to evolve in a good way, and just keep putting one foot in front of the other, and everything's going to be just fine. So relax. That's what I would say.
That is good advice for anybody. And if you guys are tuning in, whether it's YouTube, Facebook, or listening in on the podcast, make sure that you head over to dimitrisite.com to get in touch. Also follow Jiu Jitsu on Instagram. Jiu Jitsu is on Netflix right now. Make sure that you head over there and give it a review. Those are helpful too. Dimitri, is there anything else that we can add? Anywhere else that people can follow you?
No, I think those are terrific places. Dimitri's site is also on Instagram. So I appreciate the time that you gave me, Meredith, and everybody stay safe and have fun.
We appreciate you. Looking forward to more movies and whatever else is to come. Hope that we can stay in touch. And I hope you come back when you have other things that you're releasing.
I will. I look forward to it.
Thank you so much, everybody. This is Dimitri Logothetis with Geek Speak. Thank you for tuning in. We're out of here. Geek out. At Geek Insider, we foster relationships with those in the geek sphere so we can give our audience the insider view of entertainment, tech, and more.